All right. I'd like to start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rucha Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is Now I Am Become Death, the Destroyer of Worlds. And this is a direct quote from Robert J. Oppenheimer, who was a scientist that was one of the heads over the Manhattan Project that was used down in New Mexico. I believe it was forget the Los Alamos or something like that in New Mexico, and pretty much he was one of the main figures that the Lord used in these times to pretty much establish the modern day warfare and weaponry that the world uses today. So I just went to chat GPT. I was asking a few different questions on different things, and it wasn't giving me really too much. So the first question that I asked, right, is what country will launch nuclear missiles first? And it gave me a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo. So my next question was, why did Robert J. Oppenheimer say, I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, when he saw the aftermath of the explosion? J. Robert Oppenheimer said, now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, after witnessing the first successful test of a nuclear bomb, the Trinity test on July 16, 1945, because he was overwhelmed by the profound and terrifying power of what he and his team had created. Okay? And you have to understand, when they saw this, they saw just one explosion. This particular explosion that rocked certain ones to the core. Others were joyful and cheerful. And the horror that he felt, the prophets felt even worse when they were in the midst of these visions that the Lord gave them. All right. That's why he said that, because he didn't rejoice, because he was like, oh shit, we done messed up. Right. It says the quote itself is from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. In that text, the God Krishna reveals in his divine form to the warrior Arjuna, and Arjuna realizes the immense power and inevitability of fate. Oppenheimer, who had studied Sanskrit and read the Gita in its original language, found that moment from the scripture fitting. Here's why it resonated with him. Recognition of destructive power. The bomb wasn't just a new weapon. It was a weapon capable of destroying entire cities in seconds. Oppenheimer realized the world had entered a new and dangerous era, right? And that's why, what's his name? Albert Einstein, on how World War IV would be fought. Albert Einstein supposed, quote, about World War IV being fought with sticks and stones reflects a widespread fear that a future global conflict would result in the complete collapse of civilization, rendering modern warfare obsolete and pushing humanity back to its most primitive state. And this fitting because the world, Esau is trying to reset the world, but the world is going back to a reset, but it's going back to a reset in righteousness, where all of these modern weapons are going to be gone. Modern buildings and technology and cell phones and all that's all going to be gone. It's going to be a totally different world, and it's going to be on a much higher level and higher plane than anything you see here in the world. It's going to be, in plateaus above the globe. Shalom Dimash, if you watch it. It says, while the exact wording and attribution are debated, with similar sentiments expressed by others as early as 1946, The quote conveys Einstein's concern that the destructive power of nuclear weapons in a World War III would leave humanity incapable of sustaining advanced civilization and its technology. See, and this is exactly why the Lord gave Esau the power, to build these missiles, or to take that destructive power and put it into vehicles that can travel from one part of the world to the other to bring this destructive force, because that's going to be the beginning of cleaning up the earth, and that's going to cause a lot of devastation and destruction. Right. So going back, it says moral and existential weight. It says, though the Trinity test was a scientific success, it marked a turning point where science crossed into mass destruction. And why? Because this is something that was already prophesied for it to happen. We're going to get into it. I know your brothers know, Isaiah 54:16, I have created. Matter of fact, I'm going to read it, and then we're going to come back to it, because I did ask that question. But since it's on the mind, the spirit, Isaiah 54:16 says, behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals in the fire, and that bringeth forth an instrument for his work. Right, the ancient smiths were, the metal smiths. There's another term for them, blacksmiths. That would create the ancient weapons like swords and daggers and shields and helmets and breastplates, so on and so forth. It says, and I have created the waster to destroy. So we're going to come back to this, because the modern day smiths today would be the scientists. The instruments of their work would be the modern weaponry. And the waster to destroy is that nuclear destructive power that the Lord allowed them to harness and tap into and put into actual vehicles to shoot from one side of the world to the other, right? So it says, Oppenheimer felt a personal responsibility and guilt, especially as the bombs were soon dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Fatalism in the Gita. In the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna that destruction is part of the cosmic order, and that he, Krishna, is the force that brings it about. By quoting this, Oppenheimer may have been reflecting on the inevitability of what had happened and his own role as an instrument of that force. See? So he played a major role in that. And this is biblical. This is prophetic. He later said in interviews that while people laughed and celebrated at the test site, a few were silent. And he thought of the Gita. His words weren't just dramatic, they reflected deep inner conflict. Yeah, because the Lord was plaguing this devil with visions and all of that. It says, in short, the quote captured both the scientific triumph and the moral horror of creating a weapon that could end civilization. And it's going to end civilization, or should I say, it's going to bring an end to the modern ruling empire, which is the last empire of the heathen that's going to be ruling on the planet. When once these devils go down, the Edomites, which the scriptures tell us that the last rulers to rule would be Esau. Let's get that real quick for those of you that may not be familiar with it. We go to 2nd Ezra, chapter 6, right? And we're going to go straight to the point, verse 7. Then answered I and said, this is Ezra speaking, what shall be the parting asunder of the times, or when shall be the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth? Right, because these are questions that the prophets always asked. When is the end time? And what are the signs that are going to come to pass? And that we may know that the kingdom of heaven is next, or is here. Right. It says, and he said unto me, from Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born of him, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau, because at the birth of Jacob and Esau, that was the beginning of the end. All right. It says, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. And when Esau came into rulership, which began roughly around 330 BC, when Alexander, they call him the Great, we call him the Greek or the Freak or the Creep, took over or controlled the known world, that began the rule of the wicked. Then after them came the Romans, and then the Romans fell to Jake, and then 1,000 years into the future or so, then came Esau back into power. Why? Why didn't Because you had other major empires out there that were powerful. You had the Arabs, the Ishmael. They were very powerful. They were a force to be reckoned with over there. Why didn't Ishmael get on top and became the last rulers? Why didn't Ham? They have a lot. Why didn't Moab? Moab has billions of people. Why didn't Elam? They have billions of people. Why Esau? Because it's scripturally the so-called white man or the Edomites would be ruling at the end when Yahushua would come back. All right. So going back here, right, they reflect a deep inner conflict. In short, the quote captured both scientific triumph and moral horror of creating a weapon that could end civilization. So the world is not gonna end like as vocab, that demon says, that it's just gonna explode and that's it. No, that's not gonna happen. The current rulers, the Edomites and the other nations, are going to be taken down, and Yahushua's kingdom is going to be established. That's why he's known as King of Kings and Lord of Lords in the book of Revelation 19. So the next question I ask, it says, could Isaiah 54:16 be speaking of these modern day scientists creating these modern weapons, the missile being the waster to destroy? That's a deep and thought-provoking question. Let's take a look at Isaiah 54:16, which in the King James Version reads, behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals in the fire, and that bringeth forth an instrument for his work, and I have created the waster to destroy. Now you're asking whether this verse could be interpreted as a prophecy or a symbolic reference to modern scientists, right? Because what is a smith? What is a blacksmith? What? What is a blacksmith? I don't know if it's all one word. A blacksmith is a tradesperson who shapes metal, primarily iron, by heating it in the furnace and then using tools like hammers and anvils to forge it into a desired shape. Historically, blacksmith created a wide range of functional items, including tools, weapons, and agricultural implements. That's why at the end it says, beat your swords into plowshares, because the world is going to go from war by the man of war, Esau, to peace. No more war. It says, making them a vital part of communities before era of mass industrialization. Today, blacksmithing continues as a form of art and craftsmanship. See, it's art and craftsmanship. It's not, the weapons that are desired in modern technological advanced warfare. It says, with some individuals specializing in artistic pieces. See, so this is what they do. They would make tools. They would make weapons. They would make agricultural things, the shovels and just things of that nature, that were used for farming. All right. So it goes on to say, now you're asking whether the verse could be interpreted as a prophecy of symbolic reference to modern scientists, which the modern scientists are the modern day weapon makers. It says, like nuclear physicists and their creation of modern weapons, with the missile being the waster to destroy. Here's a breakdown of the possible symbolic parallels. Biblical image, modern interpretation. The smith, scientists, engineers developing advanced weapons. Blowing coals in a fire, nuclear fission, scientific experimentation, or weapon development. Instrument for his work, nuclear bombs, missiles, or other destructive technology. The waster to destroy, missiles or weapon systems designed specifically for mass destruction. Didn't Esau have a term, WMD, weapons of mass destruction? Could Isaiah 54:16 refer to modern weapons? While the original context of Isaiah 54 is God's promise of protection and restoration to Israel after exile, some theologians and readers interpret certain scriptures prophetically or symbolically, especially in light of modern events, right? Because, with the salvation of Israel comes the judgment of Esau and the other nations and even the unbelieving Israelites. So what is the Lord going to use? Because the first time the Lord brought judgment on the earth, it was by way of water, the flood. This time, the second death, as is stated in the book of Revelation, is going to be by fire. So what is going to cause this great fire that's going to cause this great lake of fire, to engulf and bring judgment? Here we understand it is speaking about here in America, Babylon the Great. What's going to cause that? These nuclear missiles. So it says, in that light, the idea of the Most High creating the waste of the destroyed may suggest that destructive forces, though terrible, are still under divine sovereignty, right? Because when we go to Isaiah 45, and this is what people get away from. They think, that the Most High is all love. That's it. It's just love. It just has one characteristic. We have many characteristics, but he only has one. So this is Isaiah 45:7. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, do all these things. So the Lord creates both sides. When we go to Amos, chapter 3 and verse 6, says, shall a trumpet be blown in the city and the people not be afraid? Right, the trumpet was an alarm of war. Shall there be evil in the city and Yahweh have not done it? So the Lord does these things. He allows these things to happen. Why? To fulfill his words, for prophecy's sake. So it says it could be interpreted as warning, or as a warning or acknowledgement that mankind has the ability to create tools of massive destruction, but these do not escape the Most High's awareness or control, of course, because he's the one that made them, to put the spirit in them to do this. It says that when men are sleeping, that's when the Lord seals their instructions. Caution with interpretation. It's important to distinguish between literal exegesis, what the text means in the original context, right? And it's a prophecy. So obviously, if it's a prophecy of thousands of years in the future, the wording or the phrases or the words that used to describe things back then would be different, totally different than today. Because terms like America, nuclear missile, and things of that nature didn't exist back then. Nuclear silos, scientists, as far as like what modern day science, they didn't exist back then. Those terms. These are modern terms. It says, and allegorical or prophetic interpretation, how it might be applied to future or modern contexts. While the verse doesn't literally refer to modern weapons, which it does, it's not unusual for readers to see parallels, especially given how closely the language of instruments and destruction can resonate with today's technological realities, right? It says, final thought. Yes, Isaiah 54:16 can be interpreted symbolically to refer to modern scientists and weapons if you're reading it through a prophetic or allegorical lens. That kind of interpretation isn't out of line with how many people apply scripture to current events, though it goes beyond the original historical context, right? But it was a prophecy. It wasn't something that was modern at that time. It was something that the prophet Isaiah saw in the future, right? So now I jumped down and I asked, Isaiah 95 speaks of wars being fought on the battlefield by men of war. Then it speaks of a particular battle being fought with fire. Could that be nuclear war? You're referring to Isaiah 95, which in the King James Version reads, for every battle of the warrior is with confused noise. This is ancient wars and garments rolled in blood. That's how they were fought. But this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. So this is the part that I'm asking. Right? This is a fascinating verse, and your question is a common one among people who study Bible prophecy, especially in light of modern warfare like nuclear weapons. And this is the thing. People claim to believe in the Bible, but they try to get away from the prophecies. They don't understand the prophecies. Why? Because they're not prophets. Surely the Lord power will do nothing, but he revealeth his secrets unto his servants, the prophets. Right? Let's break it down. Part 1. Every battle of the warrior is with confused noise and garments rolled in blood. This describes traditional warfare, ancient or conventional combat, confused noise, chaos, shouting, clashing of swords, the sound of war, right? Blood splattering everywhere, limbs being cut off, men groaning and and yelling, some yelling in pain, others yelling, from the adrenaline that's pumping in their veins, because they're amped up for war. Garments rolled in blood, hand-to-hand combat, bloodshed, visible violence. Part 2, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. This signals a different kind of battle, one characterized not by noise and hand-to-hand bloodshed, but by burning and fuel of fire. Could this refer to nuclear war? Symbolic possibilities. Burning and fuel of fire can easily evoke images of intense heat, blinding light, and total destruction, elements present in nuclear warfare. And that's why when Oppenheimer saw that, he got a taste, just a taste. He got a taste of, what the prophets saw in the past when they witnessed these things. Like, for instance, Isaiah, right? Isaiah witnessed the intense horror of nuclear destruction. This is the book of Isaiah, chapter 34 and verse 4. It says, and all the hosts of heaven shall be dissolved, meaning all of the planes and drones and helicopters or whatever Esau has or the nations have, especially Esau, up in the air, that's going to all be dissolved when the destruction comes. And the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll. The heavens being rolled together as a scroll means, in modern day terms, the mushroom cloud. When you type in an image of a mushroom cloud, right? Mushroom cloud, it looks like a scroll that was rolled together, as you see right here. You could go to images, and you could see these are, you could see, if you look at it closely, it resembles a scroll being rolled together, especially in pictures like this one, and that's why he described, that's the best thing he could use to describe it, was a scroll being rolled together up in the heavens. So he saw this devastation, and Oppenheimer got a little taste of that. He got a little taste of that. It says, Isaiah 34 and 4, and all the hosts of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll, and all their hosts shall fall down as a leaf falleth off from the vine, and as a falling fig from the fig tree. Right, that's the missiles coming down in an arching fashion. And if you look at how missiles are shot off, they arc out or arch out of their the silos or the submarines or wherever they shot from, for trucks, right? And then they'll come in an arching fashion, and then they'll come like an arc all the way down and then come back down in the same fashion. All right. So going back, it says nuclear weapons do not cause blood-soaked hand-to-hand battles. Exactly. They vaporize, incinerate, and leave cities in ruins. And that's why the Apostle Peter saw the devastation where it says the elements shall melt with fervent heat. In that light, some interpreters believe this verse may foreshadow a future war involving fire-based or energy-based destruction. Yes, because that's World War III, which the scriptures speak about, the three world wars. I may ask chat that one day, if the Spirit, reminds me, or puts it in my spirit to bring it out. Prophetic interpretation. Some Bible students and prophecy teachers view this passage as pointing towards a future apocalyptic war, possibly involving nuclear weapons. It's involving nuclear weapons because they have the technology. Nothing escapes the Most High. The Lord didn't, have the prophets write certain things down and it just cut off at a certain point. Or after the Roman Empire, that's it. The Lord didn't know what else was going to happen. So we have to wait for everything to happen, and then he could put it all in the book afterwards. No, it was already set up, but it just wasn't set up in a fashion or in wordings that would be understood today, except by the prophets, who the Lord would open up their minds to see these things and then go out there and speak on them, They note that Isaiah wrote this thousands of years before the technology existed. Exactly. But the description fits aspects of modern warfare eerily well. Why? Because that's exactly what it's talking about. You know, it says context. What's the verse really about? In context, Isaiah 9 is a messianic prophecy. It foretells the coming of the Messiah who will end war and bring peace. See verse 6, for unto us a child is born. Right, because when you go to Revelation 19, it speaks about, you know, the Lord bringing war. Matter of fact, let me get that. Isaiah 19 and 11. I'm sorry, Isaiah. Revelation 19 and 11. It says, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. This is dealing with Yahushua, same as Revelation 6. And he that sat upon him was called faithful and true, and in righteousness he does judge and make war. That's what he's coming for. All right. It says some scholars interpret verse 5 as a contrast. War, as it has always been, noisy, bloody, versus a decisive fiery event that marks the end of conflict, right? Because that's what's going to bring the destruction, the second death, the lake of fire, possibly symbolizing divine judgment or the final battle before peace, right? And it's not possibly, get possibly out of there. It's exactly what it is. It symbolizes divine judgment and the final battle before peace. So while the text may not literally predict nuclear war, it does. It's just not saying it in those terms. It's reasonable to see symbolic or prophetic parallels if you're reading with that lens, and that's exactly what you read it with. Summary: could Isaiah 95 be speaking of nuclear war? Not literally. Yes, it is literally, but symbolically or prophetically. Yeah, because they didn't have the modern technological terms that they have today back then. Yes, it could fit. No, it does fit. And if it fits, you can't acquit. The shift from blood and noise to burning and fire lines up with the nature of modern warfare, particularly nuclear weapons. Many believe this verse foreshadows a final fiery judgment, and it's not unreasonable to connect that with nuclear destruction in a prophetic sense. That's right. So let me go on. So I wrote down, I said, yes, Isaiah wrote this right here, because I grabbed that from somewhere around here, where it said that Isaiah wrote this. That was right here. Isaiah wrote this thousands of years before the technology existed. So I said, yes, Isaiah wrote this thousands of years before the technology existed. But in the book of Daniel 12:4, it says that knowledge would increase. Yes, exactly. You're making a powerful connection. Let's look at Daniel 12:4, which says, but thou, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. What does this verse mean? Especially knowledge shall be increased. Many Bible readers and prophecy scholars interpret this as a description of the end times, and it is, to the time of the end. You know, with two key signs: many shall run to and fro, often interpreted as an increase in global movement or travel. Exactly. Something unheard of in Daniel's time, right? Because you had to go by foot, by beast, or by ship, you know, on the seas. And that took time. It says in today's world, planes, trains, space travel, internet traffic, etc. Exactly. Knowledge shall be increased. This part is especially interesting in light of your point. Interpreted as a rapid explosion of information, technology, and scientific discovery, including nuclear physics, missile and weapons systems, artificial intelligence, space exploration, digital networks, and global communication. This is what the chat's speaking about. You know, it says linked to modern weaponry. Now, tying this to your earlier reference from Isaiah 9:5, burning and fuel of fire, Daniel 12:4 suggests that in the time near the end, mankind would experience a massive increase in knowledge. This knowledge could easily encompass the scientific breakthroughs that led to atomic weapons, missiles, and modern warfare. Exactly. Many interpret this to mean that ancient prophets foresaw a technologically advanced future, and they did. That's why the Apostle John saw people getting microchipped in their brain, in their hands. You know, the prophets didn't get sick, you know, and wonder and where, oh Lord, who shall save me in those times? What did they see to even make statements like that? They saw the devastating power. They saw today's technological age. They saw modern warfare. And they saw the end, the destructive power of the nuclear missiles that the Lord gave these devils, which is one of the Most High's armies. Many interpret this to mean that ancient prophets foresaw a technologically advanced future, though they lacked the vocabulary to describe it precisely. Exactly. Because if you see something that doesn't exist in your time, you're going to try to describe it as best you can with whatever, whatever descriptions you can that are in your everyday life. You're not going to be able to describe something thousands of years in the future in the wordings or technological wordings of that time, because it don't exist in your time. It says prophetic echoes and other scriptures. Here are some other places where fire, destruction, and sudden warfare could be interpreted as symbolic of modern or nuclear war. Zechariah 14 and 12. I didn't tell chat that, they brought it up. Describes a plague where people's flesh melts away while they stand. Many see this as eerily similar to the radiation effects from a nuclear explosion, and that's exactly what happens. That's why they've done movies on it. Terminator 2, Judgment Day. You know, the movie Knowing and others. It says Revelation 19, 17 through 18 speaks of fire, smoke, and brimstone from the mouths of war horses, killing a third of mankind. Exactly. You know? And that's also speaking about that destruction, the nuclear missiles, the very ending of Revelation, the 9th chapter. It says, some interpret this as symbolic imagery of missiles, tanks, or modern weaponry. Exactly. 2 Peter 3:10, the elements shall melt with fervent heat, often tied to the idea of fiery destruction, sometimes interpreted as thermonuclear fire. That's exactly what it is. That's what's going to cause this great lake of fire. So it says, summary, you're absolutely right to link Daniel 12:4 to the modern age, especially when paired with other scriptures like Isaiah 9:5. The increase in knowledge has enabled humanity to create tools of both wonder and unimaginable destruction. And that's why Oppenheimer made that statement, I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. Many believe that these prophetic scriptures, though written in ancient terms, are glimpses of our modern world, seen through the eyes of prophets guided by divine revelation. Exactly. Because the Most High is in control of everything. Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. Would you like to explore how all of this might connect to a possible end times timeline or current global events? And I just said yes, just to see what it would say. Great. Let's explore how scriptures like Daniel 12:4, Isaiah 9, and others might connect to an end times timeline, especially through the lens of modern technology, warfare, and prophetic fulfillment. It says, note, what follows is a commonly held view among many Bible prophecy scholars and believers, but interpretations vary widely, because they're not all prophets. Some view these things, well, they're not prophets. Only the prophets will be able to interpret it properly. The spirit of the prophets is subject to the prophets. Some view these things symbolically, others literally, and some mix both approaches, always weigh interpretations carefully and prayerfully. End times time link, prophetic viewpoint with modern parallels. Number 1, time of the end begins, Daniel 12:4. Knowledge shall increase, many shall run to and fro. Science, explosion in technology, internet, AI, nuclear physics, rapid global travel, communication, travel and communication. Accelerated scientific discovery, genetics, space, energy, seen as the groundwork for later prophetic events to unfold. Mankind reaches a point where it can self-destruct. Example given: nuclear war, climate collapse, etc. 2, wars and rumors of wars. Matthew 24, 6-7. You will hear wars and rumors of wars. Nation will rise against nation. Modern parallels, rising global tension, Russia slash NATO, China slash Taiwan, Israel slash Iran, etc. Terrorism, proxy wars, nuclear threats, fear of World War III, cyber warfare. Some connect this with Isaiah 95, where fire and destruction may suggest new forms of warfare like nuclear or energy weapons. And that's exactly what it's talking about. Because it's not going to be fought like ancient warfare. It's going to be fought in modern times. Modern times warfare, you're not going to, you're going to still have the military men on the front lines, but the main vehicles that they're using now are drones, missiles, so on and so forth. It says the rise of a global leader, Daniel 7, Revelation 13. Oh boy, I can really see they're going to go off here. A beast or political figure rises with power over many nations. That's talking about America and her allies, the so-called European allies, which goes back to the 7 heads and 10 horns, America being the 8th head. It says parallels in our time calls for global unity, centralized governments, or AI-led peacekeeping. Yeah. Increasing trust in technology and surveillance. Yep, they're going that route. Global organizations, UN, WEF, digital currencies. Come on, man. It's tying it all together. I didn't tell chat to say this. The idea is that in a time of chaos, war, economic collapse, the world will accept a strong global leader. It's not just talking about one leader, the Antichrist. Some refer to it as the Antichrist. I knew they were going to go that way. The tribulation 7-year period, no, that this already, Daniel 9:27 already happened. This is all the return of the Messiah. Yahushua returns to stop the destruction and establish his kingdom. Well, he's coming to bring the destruction. I am come to send fire on earth, and what will I if it be already kindled? He's not coming to stop anything. He's coming to intensify it. We just read that that he makes war, and righteousness, seen as coming just in time to prevent total annihilation. Yeah, I mean, if those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. Yeah, I mean, the Lord is going to take Esau down, but he's coming to bring more fire. Battle of Armageddon, which they don't understand what it is. World powers gather against Jerusalem, but are defeated. No, they're not going to gather against Jerusalem. They're just going to be gathered in the Middle East to fight. Because the people of the Most High are not in that land. You have some Israelites in there. You have the Israelites down in the south in Dimona. You have other Israelites that have left from America in recent times that are over there. You have Israelites among the Palestinians. You have Israelites among the small hats. But overall, the people that are there are not the people of the Most High. Yahushua reigns in peace, Isaiah 9:6-7. Millennial kingdom and final judgment. 1,000 years reign, final rebellion. Nope, just they're going off on that. How do nuclear weapons fit in? Zechariah 14:12. This is kind of just a little all over the place. Where are we now? The many prophecy teachers believe we are very close to the beginning of this timeline, noting, nope. Your final thoughts. You're connecting some very meaningful dots. Scriptures like Isaiah 95 and Daniel 12:4 may have seemed cryptic in ancient times, but they resonate strongly in the nuclear, digital, and AI-powered age we live in today. Whether the fire is literal nuclear war, divine fire, or both, it's going to be divine fire. Just like the Lord caused fire to come down from heaven on Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities. But this time he gave them a vehicle to be able to move that fire from one part of the world to the other. The message is clear. The Bible foresaw a time when human knowledge would outspace wisdom, and only the Most High could bring real peace. Would you like a visual time? No, I'm good. So, at the end of the day, these modern terminologies are not written in the scriptures in their modern form. They're written in the form that the prophets understood back then. The things that were written aforetime were written for our learning. So we're at the point now where these things are about to explode on the scene. And all we're doing is waiting patiently, for the prophecies. And I'll leave you with Revelation. I'm sorry, not Revelation. 2 Peter. Got Revelation on the brain. 2 Peter chapter 3. And I'll read from 10. The main point is in 13. 2 Peter 3:10. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise. What is that great noise? The destruction of the missiles. That boom, boom. And the elements shall melt with fervent heat. That's everything in this path. Joel 2, it says, in front of him is like the Garden of Eden, and behind him is a desolate wilderness. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burnt up, right? Because Esau's and the nations' empires will be brought down when this destruction happens. Because once Esau goes down, all other nations are going down. Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in all holy conversation and godliness, looking for and hasting unto the coming of the day of the Most High. Right. So we're looking for and hasting to these. We want the Lord to bring this destruction, but we also ask the Lord to have mercy on us when this time comes, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. What is that fervent heat? The destructive fire from these missiles and the lasers from the chariots. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth wherein dwelleth righteousness. Because this is going to be the Lord's way of resetting everything and bringing everything back into the hands of Yahushai, and bring a righteous world. And we being joint heirs with him. So with that, I pray that your brothers and few sisters have been edified. To the next time I say, Shalom.